Hi everyone, welcome to Basement Bible Breakdown. I'm glad you could join me. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for some of the questions that I've been getting. Some of those are a little bit silly and arguing. Of course, it's going to happen when it comes from a preterist. But I'm not going to duck and balk against it. Ask your questions. I'll do my best to answer it in a way that you can understand. Now, over the last few weeks, I have been busy putting up my new website. That's middleism.org, and it's just basics of my position, and it kind of directs people to the Facebook page and my blog, where they can actually ask questions, write questions and things like that, and comment on things, and I'll do my best to respond in a timely manner. But it has taken me a little bit to get this new website up and going again, rewriting it completely from scratch. And the fun part about it is I've been learning the code myself. I haven't been relying on anybody else, but I went out and learned the HTML code and have written and designed these all by myself for the pure fun of it. They might not be perfect aesthetically to some people, but it is my own work and not somebody else's. Well, today I want to start in on a case against preterism, and we're going to be doing a series of videos here arguing against the whole case that preterism presents. And so it'll be a series here, and we're going to go one after another kind of a thing. And I'm not going to deviate from that. So thank you for watching, and thank you for joining in. And I'll try to keep it short so that we can get to the point real simple, and then move on to the next one. So the first basic point, though, it comes to when we're talking about preterism, is the claim that Jesus returned in AD 70 based on the Matthew 24 passage of the Olivet Discourse. Now, here's the thing. If an event happens, then we should be able to go back to those events that are described in history and see that they happened. So our question is when we go back to the events of AD 70 and what Josephus recorded and other historians at about that time period, up to 325, where Eusebius even wrote a history based on the records of what other people wrote concerning the church and what happened up until that time, we have a good solid foundation of what happened. So does any one of those men anywhere say that Jesus returned in 70 AD? And no, we have no record of any man claiming that it happened. But we do have records of each of those men, or some of those men, claiming that the Olivet was completely fulfilled in AD 70. Eusebius back to Barnabas both claim, and Clement makes comments about the destruction of Jerusalem being past tense and claiming a future second coming that they were looking forward to. That's something that is going to happen in the future. So we have to look at the history then of the evidence towards saying that there is some kind of fulfillment. And what we basically have to do is look at what the Bible says about the event and what's going to happen. And that's where we're going to next. But I want to first bring up here real quickly, again, is that there is no historical testimony for fulfillment in AD 70. There's none. Nobody said they saw Jesus come. Nobody declared that he came. And of course, we're talking about the men that were living before and after. Such men as Barnabas, as we talked about, Clement, Ignatius, Papias. These are all men who wrote after 70 AD, and we have their writings. But of course, the argument, of course, would be from preterists is that it's either all lies, not true, fake, written by apostate men, and so forth. Anything is done to discredit these records and testimonies. Now, Ed Stevens has claimed that even John died before, so all Christians were raptured out in 70 AD. There should be no Christians left whatsoever on earth. But at the same time, we have records of them fleeing to Jerusalem and fleeing to Pella and living at Pella. We have the records of who it was that became the next pastor after James was killed, was Clopas, which would be a relative of Jesus. I don't remember if it was an uncle or a cousin or something like that, but he took over the church of Jerusalem, and that's what they have recorded in history. If you go back to the RCC, the Roman Catholic Church, they will tell you who the pastors were at what time. And when the churches started, who was the pastoring of there. For example, Peter in Rome, and Clement was also in Rome, and others who were there and were a part of things and wrote letters back and forth. Um, and it seems kind of off to think that everybody would have been raptured, completely taken out, as Ed claims, and yet not one person ever declared that the jails all of a sudden in Rome was completely emptied of Christians, that the pastors at these churches all of a sudden just disappeared, unless you account and say they were all apostate. But I find that hard to believe, since Barnabas himself was considered an apostle, and Clement was appointed by Paul himself. And I find it hard to believe that these men would be appointing pastors who were so soon become apostate. And that's something that Don Preston would argue. But also in Preston's argument, he talks about how the Christians fled Jerusalem and went to Pella, and that's where they were living at in Pella during that time. And so therefore, you have Christians, of course, under the CB view of living and beyond that. But of course, he totally ignores everything about the historical record. Now, one of the main points that people all talk about in wanting to prove that 70 AD was the second coming is they all talk about the chariots that were seen in the sky. Those are the signs of Jesus coming, things in the clouds. And here's the basic argument that makes that completely bogus. And if Preterism wants to argue with me about this generation and time statements, all these things will be fulfilled, and other things that are specific to just those little type of phrases, well then here's the things that they need to harmonize, and they refuse to do it. In 2 Thessalonians 2:8, it says that at his coming, the lawless one will be revealed at the appearing of his coming. 1 Thessalonians 4, the appearing of his coming. 1 Thessalonians 4, get this straight, it says Jesus himself will descend. Acts 1, this Jesus who you saw will come again in the same way that you saw him go. Zechariah 14, and his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives. Hebrews. He appeared the first time to deal with sin. He will appear a second time for salvation. The point is all those verses, that word epiphania is used 6 times to talk about his appearing, his visible appearing, which the word means. It means to be manifested. Something that is hidden is now revealed, and everybody can see it. Preterists tried to argue that the seeing is a spiritual thing. But when you go to look at the word, it begins with the idea of ophthalmology, ophtha, the word for Greek word for eye. It is to, and they claim that the meaning of that word is to perceive. So they understand and perceive with their thinking. And yes, there are verses where that is used at, where Jesus or somebody else was able to perceive the hearts and the thoughts of other people. That was not a seeing something with their eyes, but that was something that he was perceiving by the Spirit in his own mind. But yet at other times it talks about that when they were walking on Jesus on the road of Emmaus, their eyes were closed. Jesus expounded things. And then they perceived afterwards, after Jesus, they perceived that he was who he was, Jesus. So it was something that they saw with their eyes and perceived and understood. But see, that word different forms of it, and they're seeing, is used in different places. Like in 1 John 3:2, where we shall see him as he is. That is with the eye. And the intent there, of course, is we shall see with our eyes and understand him. We shall perceive what's going on here. So that's just a given. But the word appearing is used as a noun, epiphania. And it means to be, in the Roman world, it had everything to do with when Caesar sat on his throne. That was his parousia when he came into a city. But then when he sat on his throne and was crowned Caesar, that's when he became God. That's where the saying comes, Caesar is God. So now he's sat on his throne, and this is the epiphany of his life. The epiphania, the shining forth, the brightness of his glory, where he becomes God. And Paul is taking that word and applying it to Jesus, and he uses it 6 times to talk about his appearing, his shining forth when he appears. Will be a grand display of who he is. with the voice of command and the trumpet and all of that, there's this signifying to the whole world where every eye will see that Christ is here and returns. And that's exactly what is coming across here when it says, Jesus himself descends. Well, I'm sorry, chariots flying around the sky is not Jesus himself. It says that he will come and he will stand on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. He will come in like manner, which means he left from this earth, he went up out of the clouds. Well, then he'll come out of the clouds and back to this earth. And that is what's been understood by scholars from those basic passages that I've alluded to now, that it is Christ who will show up and he will appear. And that's why AD 70 does not work. If Paul teaches that Christ will appear, he will be manifested, he will be seen, that's exactly what it means, folks. We cannot change that word to say that his return is invisible and comes like his Father did in the Old Testament. Because remember, Jesus came in the flesh, appeared in the flesh the first time. And so unlike his Father, he has done already many things that his Father never did. So that comparison there is a bogus argument. It does not work. And it's been severely refuted. So let's just get that across one more time. Jesus never appeared in AD 70. Nobody testified to that. That is the baseline. That is the bottom line. And until the preterists can come up with a verse or something that says that Jesus was seen and understood to be seen, or somebody saw him in AD 70, we have no historical proof that he ever came in AD 70. The second part of that people tend to forget is that he said he would come with the saints. That's exactly what it says in 2 Thessalonians 3. He will come with his saints. And it also says that in Zechariah 14, 4. When he comes, he will come with his saints. Revelation 19. When he comes, there will be an army of his saints following after him. So it's not Jesus himself, but his army of the saints, and that's vindication. They become his army that wipes out the army that has come against Jerusalem, which creates the biggest contradiction in the world when you claim that God sends the Roman army and then Jesus comes in 19 and destroys the army God sent. People don't see that as a contrast and as a literal. Forget it, it's a lie. But we'll deal with that in another point in time. But for right now, I'll close this up and say that is enough. But do due diligence, people. Go to the history, look at the church history, not secular history. But even then, neither one of them claim or show or provide evidence that Jesus returned in AD 70. Okay, so thank you for watching. My other videos will be coming out soon. And so just keep a watch out, and I'll try to spread them out evenly over the next few days. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for asking questions. And I hope that this helps in giving people an answer for preterism, why it does not work, why it needs to be rejected. So the first point, there is no historical evidence that he ever came in AD 70. We'll go from there and deal with the rest after that. Thank you.